My name's Phil, and I have aphasia. But my goal is to talk about other people's stories too. Remember, it's your voice. There's no way around it. The only way to get better is to practice. Now, you don't have to be like me, but you need to be able to talk and listen to other people's stories too. Like this one right here. My name is Philip Oxenheim. I'm with Genevieve Richardson, and she's a speech pathologist. And I don't know the first time I met her was on for a show with um so with the show was called
Broke buddies.
I was there with Stroke Buddies, and that's how I found Genevieve, and she had me in her podcast, and she's been good for me to talk about other stuff like this because I'm doing video and audio, and here she is.
Awesome, Phil. We've only known each other a few weeks, but what you have accomplished in these last 3 weeks with the technology for not only doing your YouTube channel, which you've been doing, but now you've added the audio podcast. And that's awesome.
Months since, like in my intro, so I was saying I want people to their songs and stuff, but I was like, what about people who don't want to be in video? They just want to talk. So I said that made sense.
Yeah, because it's not that much more work to do the audio once you have the video.
Yes,
So but there is still a lot of technology and things that have to get linked up together, right, Phil? Think
yes.
about all that neuroplasticity you're doing for yourself,
Wait, and
learning.
yes, but thing is, I like that kind of stuff is like anyway. So it's like that's too. But can you talk about what you do?
Sure. I've been in speech pathology for over 30 years. Wow, that's a long time. And my specialty is working with aphasia and related conditions. I've been in private practice the last 4 years, and I would say my emphasis is working with folks who are a year or more after their stroke. And why that's important is the person, the survivor, and the family have already gone through the traditional rehab system, just like we know your story and what you went through. And it's really after you get home and you don't have that day-to-day rehab and you figure out what is this now? What is my life now? And that's when we really can do the good work to improve communication, improve connection, help individuals learn how to advocate for themselves, to go out in public, to tell their friends and family what they need to be able to communicate more effectively. I truly believe the real work starts after rehabilitation ends. And that's what I specialize in.
It's funny because on your on your podcast or your videos, I look at this stuff that you talk about. It doesn't pertain to me because I'm a man, not a man, but I have nobody else to my life to talk about. But the knowledge that you give me to talk about other stuff, so I'm saying, like when you're talking about for rem, the right hemisphere, and the left hemisphere is like I mean I have two hemispheres. I was like, I never thought about that. So I was like, wow. So it's good to talk about this. It's been so knowledge to talk about this kind of stuff.
And that's what, when families are going through rehab, there's not the time to get educated about what is aphasia, how does the brain work, how come my person is acting differently, or why are we just missing each other on commute, right? What are those subtle things that you don't understand? So that's part of my mission and why I've been doing the podcast. I'm coming up on 3 years, Phil.
Wow.
I've been doing that podcast. We're in the 130s, 137 or 8, or I don't know, somewhere in there. Whatever. I know, like I'm super proud of it. It's not been an easy, you know, as you're finding doing it week after week, right?
Yes.
Where I get my inspiration is with my own clients and their families. I'm very close with all of them. And I'm also in the Facebook groups. I'm reading what survivors and their spouses and significant others are talking about and wondering, okay, well, how do we get to what that root problem is? Part of it is education and understanding.
Yeah.
If I can give you an example,
Yes.
because this is what's kind of brings it home for me. When I'm reading a post in Facebook, and we'll say it's a female spouse and her husband is acting differently at home. And she, based on what I read in the post, she's taking that very personally. Like he's not saying thank you. He doesn't even acknowledge when I ask him a question. And I get thinking, well, why would that be? And then I look back at some of her other posts and I start seeing patterns that she doesn't understand that something changed in his right hemisphere and his personality is a little different, that he's not processing information the same way. And when I look at root cause, we have to go back to the basics. Well, what has changed? Because when you can understand maybe what has changed, then you're less likely to take it personally. Because what we have to do is take that emotion out of the equation.
So mom
As
had that to me because not because my right hemisphere. The fact is that I was different, and now I got better because I'm me now. But it's still the same thing. Like some people is not the same they was before. And my mom, I now thinking about it, my mom was like, no, she felt out after a while. She was not taking anything personal anymore
yeah,
because she's and I was good because I was doing some dumb things for a little bit, and finally I got better with her.
absolutely. And that's part of it. But if you can imagine that if that wife is getting offended and
Yes,
she's taking it personally, and then what that just makes that gap between that connection, it just makes it wider and wider and it gets resentful and it snowballs in the wrong direction. And then how do you come back from that?
sometimes as it goes before saying, talk with each other, and it's hard to do that.
But if you're feeling emotional and you're
Yes,
feeling disconnected, if you're feeling attacked, if you're feeling unappreciated by your survivor,
so
you know,
that's a good thing.
that's like, without aphasia, people go to marriage counseling, right? You throw aphasia, you throw personality changes, you throw any kind of thinking changes that you can have after a stroke, and that just makes it so much more difficult.
I wouldn't know. I don't have the. I can't believe do that kind of stuff because I look at the stories and stuff and like saying that's even worse than having a phaser for myself because it's me, but having a right hemisphere, it's a whole different mood swings and stuff like this. And like, I'm 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 more lucky, and I like to talk, but my right hemisphere, I don't know if it would be different. I guess it would, but is look at those stories like it's this tough. It's
Yeah. There's a lot of things that can change and it doesn't always get diagnosed, right? If there's a personality change noticed or they're not processed when they're in the rehab situation, it's going to be acknowledged, but it may not be directly treated because there's going to be other bigger things to work on,
That's right.
right?
Yeah.
And so it's after rehab when you get home and life settles in, you get to a routine, you understand what your day to day is. That's when you really start seeing those more subtle changes that maybe you've ignored before because you were so busy, right?
Yeah.
Right? There's only so much you can process.
Yes.
But you bring up a good point, Phil. Even with your mom, she had to give you the time to recover and acknowledge that in the beginning you were different and you acted differently, right? Because your brain is messed up,
Yeah.
right? It's got to heal. It's right because I think of it like an electrical panel. If you have, where your breaker box, your electrical, if you pulled that off, you see a whole bunch of wires. A stroke is like pulling out a handful of those wires and cutting them off.
Like that.
And so some are still connected, right? Maybe on the outskirt, but right where those wires got pulled out, those are going to have to get reconnected somehow.
Yeah. And for me, I remember this is funny. Um, I was when I was upstairs a lot, and I was talking a lot, and I was saying I'm sorry and stuff like this. And then finally, I was talking to my mom and said, "You know what? You're crazy. I remember you now." I was like, "I know who you are now because I know I am." And you do some crazy stuff like, and I said because it was funny because I was saying so. My mom, when we talk, is just me and her. And sometimes she'll there to talk to myself, or sometimes she just wants me to listen, and sometimes she didn't want to talk to me at all, but I have to hear. I said, "That's a lot of stuff to talk about." So I got to talk. Sometimes you talk to listen. Sometimes you're just listening and didn't really talk to me. I said, "Not only you're a woman, you're my mom. Oh, we're good now."
So it took you a while to kind of understand, put it all back together.
And because like, because I went weird and okay, we're good again, and we're good after that. But it takes some time.
What can you quantify? How long did that take?
It was last year, and I remember last year before I had my lift chair, and it was right. It was I think it was like the first two 3 weeks in Dayton, Ohio. So I was always in there for 2 years already, and when I got to Dayton, Ohio, my mom she had to do the cleaning, cooking, and everything. And we really, and this it was the first time we really get to know each other again. And I was getting mad at sometimes. I didn't know why, and I always said to her, "Listen, it's not your fault. I just know what I'm saying, and I don't know what my mind's saying right now." And then we would talk, and a lot of times we don't talk as much because I can go upstairs and downstairs now. But she was always saying like sometimes she would listen and talk to me, and sometimes we would talk. She's not even listening to me; she was just talking to talk. And I'm saying, "What's wrong with you?" And I was like, "This is me." And I found out that I know what my mom was. She's crazy. Oh, I love her. And it was clicking because I remember how I was now. Because it took time for myself to remember, like, hold on. Because I really thought that now that I'm funny, I'm always funny, but I didn't know I was funny anymore. But I didn't know who I was. And it took some time to understand I know who you are. And I know nothing that you're saying is to hurt me.
See, right? That taking away that emotion part. So if I heard you right, Phil, you said a couple of years.
Well, the first 2 years, I still had, when I had my skull removed, I was there for 2 years almost, 2 years, 2 years. Yeah. So when I finally got to Dayton, Ohio from Vandalia, I was sitting there, and it was the first time. So the first 4 months we were talking, and eventually it. get me sometimes saying, like, I remember I was always saying, I'm sorry, and I don't know what's going on. And I realized as it got better, I remember saying, I know nothing you said is you're not to hurt me. So I know there's something wrong with me. And it was clicking. And finally said, whoa, ho, 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 ho. You're crazy. We're talking, laughing. It's like, because that's what I remember saying, that you talk to talk. Sometimes you're listening to talk. Sometimes you're not talking all, but you add the listening every way. And you're just, I was like, oh, okay, now I love you so much. And it makes so much better, like saying, I knew the whole time she was nothing to do to hurt me the whole time.
Right.
And when I knew that,
Okay.
I
So
got that, I was like,
that, but it was that deeper understanding
yes,
that took a couple of years to get to. So see, that's why I say this, the after rehab phase, when you're alone, right? You're not necessarily still working with physical, occupational speech therapy anymore. That's when the real conflict can start in
yeah,
a household, whether you're married or not, or just, like you
sure.
and your mom, or, someone who maybe has younger kids, there's a lot that needs to be processed,
Yeah, I never thought about it
right?
that way. Yes, I never thought. I always thought was your show was for people for couples, but now I think about it, like it's
It
everybody.
all, so here's the challenge. You have to speak to one person. You have to speak to one person, right?
Mhm.
Because if you hear me talking about couples and spouses, then you can still understand what I'm talking about and apply it to your own situation. Does
Yes,
that make sense?
yes, it does.
Because if I try to speak too broadly, if I try to speak to you, Phil, and your relationship with your mom, or I try to talk to spouses, or I try to talk to the divorced dad who has partial custody of his kids and he's got a fate,
Yeah.
right? I got to pick one, oh, one
Yeah.
person to talk to. I work with everybody, but the principles are the same no matter your relationship.
Really good. So, what was your whole show? What's it called again?
Listen for Life Aphasia podcast.
Cool. And thank you so much. And it's because of you that got me to do video and audio. And she's been helped in a lot of stuff. And it's funny. Even it's only been for 2 months, it feels like I've talked to you a while.
I feel the same way. And it's probably because we're talking all the time.
Yes, true.
But Phil, yeah, you just have such a personality that I do feel like I've known you for years and years.
That's one of my skills, my superpowers.
Love that.
I've always been able to talk to other people
That's
and listening.
amazing.
It's weird, but sometimes I don't want to talking about. But that's but
You try.
but now
Right.
but now because I'm doing audio and video and talking to other people, hopefully and getting into their shows talking about aphasia or even people have stroke. It's easy for other people to talk to me because I listen to other stuff.
That's right. Yeah, you're very good at that.
And
So if I may, Phil,
yes,
the other thing that I do besides the podcast, run the private practice
yes,
where I work directly and doing therapy, but I also work with spouses and care partners. So I have a whole separate business where I do training and coaching with them. And right now we are in the middle of a launch of my book, How to Help, and it's written for care partners. Because what happens, and your mom probably went through this to a certain extent too, even though you guys were separated by states, when a spouse, I'm just going to keep using the word spouse, their person has a stroke, they now have to take on all the roles and responsibilities of what they had before, but now what the spouse used to do, right?
yeah,
And they start getting buried. And it's that overwhelm and trying to learn and trying to reconnect with their person and get them to rehab or follow through with a home exercise program. Maybe they have to still keep working, whatever their situation is, becoming that caregiver overnight is hard. And once they feel buried, they never get unburied. And so I wrote the book, How to Help, to give a foundation, to give a structure to start unburying yourself. I don't have a better word for it, right? So that you get back to control. You got to have control, and you got to take care of yourself, because if you're the spouse and you're worn out, you can't support your survivor. You
Yeah.
desperately want them better. You want to get them the right people to help them get better. But if you're just, walking like a zombie because you don't get time to recharge, it just goes downhill from there. So then years later, as their person is recovering, they feel hopeless, helpless, and they don't know where to start. So what my program is doing is helping them get back to ground zero, build the structure, build the support, not feel alone, because isolation is real, not just for survivors, but for their significant others. And then we can build that path forward, help them understand what their survivor's brain is doing, help them not be emotionally reactive. Excuse me. Teach them how to communicate better. But before we can get to all those higher level things, we got to get them some control over their daily life and feeling like they get a choice and control. So that's the other thing that we're doing that I think is so very important, because when they feel like they can handle it, then they're going to bring their person to me for therapy. And then we're going to be able to make the real progress, because then they're both in a good place. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And there'll be links for everything in their show for you.
Thank you, Phil.
Now remember, subscribe, please.